Whether or not it's human, we now know that we're close to the cemetery, or one of them. It was small and couldn't have held all of our Bayers dead, so there must have been other cemeteries. This one was prominently placed crowning a hill with access along Phil's track. We now also know that the Vika stretched further down than previously thought, forming the northern boundary. The main road south from the fort was the eastern limit. To the south, there was marshy ground unsuitable for burials. And what of Phil, who's been digging right in the middle of this wedge-shaped cemetery? His persistence in Trench 7 has paid off. It's not a barrow, but he's snatched victory from the jaws of the utilities.
It's a lovely little feature. You can see that it's cut into this very orangey clay, and it's filled up with this grey-brown clay, which is exactly the same material as the subsoil, the sort of Roman subsoil. So I'm pretty confident that it is Roman in date. And I say, it's so nicely cut with a nice flat base to it, I wonder whether it didn't perhaps have some sort of timber wall inside it.
It's peculiar, that, because one just like it was excavated at right angles in the test pit that was dug a few years ago next door. So we seem to have two at right angles here, and that starts to suggest an enclosure.
Which might be the sort of feature that you actually get in a cemetery.
Well, certainly with that clay like that, I mean, almost a deliberate infill like that, that's the sort of thing you get in ritual enclosures, you know, around cremations and other burials. So I think we're where we should be.
An enclosure would probably have surrounded a family plot containing cremations marked with stones or stakes. It would be 3rd century or earlier, before the Roman Empire converted to Christianity and burial became the preferred funeral practice. Well, one thing we can say about this estate is it's pretty well stocked with gas, water and electricity pipes, most of which we found in our trenches. But with the help of South Shields residents and school kids, we've managed to unpick the story of a Roman cemetery from this maze of buildings and concrete. And I think that's a bit of a result. So what would it have looked like?
Well, judging by the fragments that we've turned up so far, we would have had a range at the back which would have contained the hall, some ranges coming off either side, which might have contained chambers and such like, an entrance into that courtyard, and then an outer courtyard where all the service buildings would have been, and including, perhaps, this building, the barn.
So we are looking at a complex of buildings?
Oh, yes, quite an extensive site, yes.
As we uncover more of the walls, we begin to get a clearer picture of this Tudor house. The evidence points to it being very big. The front wall runs from here to here. The earthworks in the orchard suggest that it extended right back to here. And the thickness of the walls suggests that it was a couple of stories high. It was a prestigious place. Stuart took me on a tour of the front of it. If I'm a visitor to the Tudor house, why am I coming up this way rather than from the road?
Well, this is where the privileged visitors would arrive, the high-status visitors. You wouldn't want to come in past all the peasants, basically.
So what can I see over here?
You'd see ornamental ponds, little waterscape just out there you can walk round.
And over there?
In this enclosure here, you'd have trees, ornamental orchard-type trees, and they'd be screening what was the old moat. By the time you got to this point here, what you'd see in front of you is this grand facade of this new Tudor house.
So presumably that's the whole point of the grand walk-up.
It is. It's showing off. It's showing off to you as a visitor. This is its display side over here.
And if you look out from the house...
Well, what you've got looking this way is an open landscape.
It's a hell of a view, isn't it?
It is. It's private and it's privileged. You can't see the village, you can't see the peasants. You've got ponds, river, open landscape, orchards, ornamental gardens. Very show-off, very Tudor.
And this is what this enormous complex would have looked like. This was an impressive building dominating the landscape, with its own entrance to the church and to the river. In the Saxon period, there was an enormous enclosure surrounding a monastic settlement. It would have had a church as the centrepiece, houses, and a few workshops. The promontory it's situated on is perfect. Easy access to York and a bit of height to give it some security. In Norman times, the present church was built and a settlement grew up around it. And then, 300 or 400 years later, an enormous Tudor mansion dominates this part of the landscape. This is something no one had expected to find. So far, our site appears to be entirely medieval. Mick had suspected that the crop marks were originally prehistoric. Phil's now found the bottom of the big enclosure ditch and can settle this.
Have you got the bottom yet, Phil?
Unusually, the crucial dating evidence is not at the bottom where you'd expect it to be.
My feelings are that it's probably was cut as a medieval ditch and is medieval. Now, we had a piece of pot about there,
Right.
which I think is going to date all of that.
Right.
There's no break in
Yeah.
the sequence.
Yeah.
If this material down here is Iron Age,
Yeah.
then you would expect somewhere about here to get a break, a turf line or something like this,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then the medieval goes in on the top. But you haven't got that. There is no break in there. So I think it's one continuous story right the way through.
So it looks as if we're going to have to accept that the whole thing's medieval then, and there's no prehistoric there at all.
The crop marks have surprised everyone by turning out to be medieval after all. But then no one knows much about medieval pig farms. It's in the right location, in forest, where pigs would feed. Perhaps the large enclosure was a pig pen with a deep pig-proof ditch round it. Inside the big enclosure, they've uncovered a medieval workplace. Good job, Matt. What have we got?
Well, we've got a large post hole there, another enormous one here.
So presumably they were posts supporting a big roofed building?
Yeah, huge. I mean, these are really substantial. And it still had the remains of a scorched post in it as well. Got another shallow post hole there, another one with packing stones there, so we may have even an internal wall going up that way.
And what's that?
Well, this to me looks like a small collapsed oven or kiln of some sort, vaguely circular, you can see it there. Over here, got a much better example of what I think that probably looked like. Beautiful circular oven or something there, still in quite a good nick. And over here, we have another one. This one's slightly more collapsed, but we can see the base of it is all scorched and burnt. And going round this area here is this ditch, which comes along here, round here, and goes off to the corner of the trench over there.
Lots of finds.
Yeah, a huge amount of really beautiful finds here. I mean, look at that jug handle.
That's
gorgeous.
gorgeous. And a heck of a lot of activity going on here. This settlement of pig farmers at Bosenham has given us an unfamiliar glimpse of ordinary life in the medieval manor of Hanslope. Powerful nobles, such as the Mordwits, grabbed the headlines of history by quarrelling with the king. But the story of Bosenham is really the history of ordinary people. Pig farmers who grazed their animals in the forest and slaughtered and scalded and smoked them in the enclosures. Remarkably, this dig has taken our archaeologists into uncharted territory because almost nothing's known about medieval pig farmers.
Hello, my name's John Gator. Time Team is fan-funded by Patreon. This vital support helps us to make new episodes. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models and masterclasses, plus lots more.